Have y'all ever become so obsessed with a Pokemon type that it kinda takes over your entire life?
Maybe.
Yeah, so I just might slightly be completely obsessed with Fairy-type Pokemon.
It's totally not for any particular reason.
The Fairy typing had been introduced for the very first time in Generation 6, and we hadn't received a new type at this point since Generation 2 with the Steel and Dark types, and let me tell you, it was amazing. I mean, ever since Fairy-type Pokemon have been introduced, I've always thought that they were super cool and super strong and cute at the same time. I just think that they have everything going for them and is really a perfect Pokemon type. The Fairy type was mostly introduced due to the fact that Dragon Pokemon had been reigning for far too long and were these unstoppable beasts and monsters that no one could even compete with until the Fairy type came around. I mean, just look at this attack animation. You're telling me this didn't need to be nerfed? Yeah, the Fairy stopped that real quick. And just like Steel and Dark, I'm so glad and happy that they went back and made a lot of older generation Pokemon Fairy type that deserved it all this time as well. I love Togekiss so much. So to both honor and share my love of the Fairy type, in today's video, I'm going to honor them by going through each generation of Pokemon that has happened since the introduction of Fairy types and just going through what the Fairy type exactly had going on in each generation. But also what I think the future of Fairy types will be as well. But I just love the Fairy type so much, so I'm so excited to be making today's video, and if you love the Fairy type as well, make sure to go ahead and bonk that subscribe button to make sure you are subscribed to the channel. But without any further ado, let's dive right on in with Generation 6. Pokemon X and Y, the ones that started it all. I am so grateful to the Kalos region for so many things, and I really feel like X and Y get such a bad rap most of the time, but there's so many good things that came out of it, like the Fairy type and like Xerneas, which is our first Fairy type legendary introduced alongside the typing. Xerneas, I feel like, was such a great introduction to what a Fairy type legendary Pokemon would even look like. Also, we of course have to talk about our newest evolution, which is still odd at this point that we haven't gotten an evolution since Generation 6, but Sylveon is amazing and adorable. I will forever have love for this Pokemon. It's probably one of my favorite evolutions, if not my favorite. I mean, how could you not love that adorable face? And it's super competitively viable too. Like, this Pokemon is scary. But of course, if we're going to talk about Generation 6, we have to talk about Mega Evolution, which is going to be coming back in Pokemon Legends ZA, and I could not be more excited. But to talk about our Fairy-type Mega Evolutions that were existing in Generation 6, let's talk about Mega Gardevoir. I love this Pokemon so freaking much, and I'm so happy to see that it was so well represented being the ace of our champion Diantha. And hey, feel how you feel about Diantha. I know she's not everybody's favorite champion, and a lot feel that she could be a lot better represented, myself included, but I love the fact that her ace Pokemon was Mega Gardevoir. I personally am a really big fan of whenever someone's ace Pokemon really just matches their entire vibe and aesthetic, and I think that Mega Gardevoir's elegance and grace just really matches with Diantha's. Also, looking at Diantha's team, it's a lot more well-rounded as a team than you might actually think. And if you couldn't guess from me talking about Diantha, we're not just talking about Pokemon today, we're talking about Fairy-type trainers as well. So of course, I have to talk about our Fairy-type gym leader, Valerie. Valerie, of course, being our very first Fairy-type Pokemon gym leader ever, and I couldn't think of a better representative to start with. Of course, I have to start off with, I love her design. I think this is one of the best dressed, best looking, best designed gym leaders we have ever gotten, ever. Point blank period. Also to mention that her gym puzzle was also really fun. I always love a little teleporting maze in the gyms in any area of Pokemon, and I think that it was really well designed as the house as well. Valerie's gym battle in the game comes around 6th, which I feel like is a very good placement of a Fairy-type gym leader, because hopefully by the 6th gym you would have something that would compete against such a strong typing such as the Fairy-type. Also, I know I just keep repeating myself that things are cute, but this gym badge is so freaking cute and I just needed to include it. And of course, back to Mega Evolution. We talked about it a little bit with Mega Gardevoir, but there are tons of Fairy-type Megas that need some love and appreciation as well, such as Mega Mawile, Mega Altaria, and of course, Mega Audino, which is not a lot of people's favorite, but she's very cute. And of course, you can't forget about what I believe is our only mythical Pokemon to have a Mega Evolution, one of my personal favorites, Mega Diancie. I love this Pokemon so much. Running right along into Generation 7, Generation 7 didn't really do anything too new for the Fairy type other than adding some new Pokemon and some new trainers, but I need to talk about Lillie. And yes, Lillie is categorized as a Fairy type Pokemon trainer. Look it up, I discovered that too. Lillie to me is one of easily the best things about Generation 7. Her entire character made me fall in love with her when I played these games for the first time. I mean, her emotional storyline going on with Lusamine, and a fantastic character arc of her just becoming more confident in herself and becoming a Pokemon trainer as well. Let me know if you agree, but in my eyes, Lillie is one of the best Pokemon characters we have ever gotten. Now on to Mina. Mina is our Fairy-type trial captain, so essentially our Fairy-type gym leader representation in Pokemon Sun and Moon, and I think that Mina's design is just straight up silly. I love her entire like artist hippie kind of vibe, and I love that we're already seeing some versatility here with our next Fairy-type representative here being a little more lackadaisical and not as prim and proper as Valerie was. Also, just a side note here, because it is Mina, I loved seeing her come back in Pokemon Let's Go, because of course these games taking place in Kanto, we weren't going to get a lot of Fairy-type representation other than the Gen 1 Pokemon that got the type, so it was really nice seeing Mina here as a Fairy-type representative of sorts for this game. And for Let's Go, other than Mina being there, honestly, the Fairy-type just gets represented pretty well through its Pokemon moves and the Pokemon that have the typing, but there isn't really a lot to focus on with the Fairy-type in this game, so I'm just gonna go ahead and keep talking about Generation 7. But what started with Xerneas in Generation 6 for a Fairy-type legendary, we now have 4 of with the Tapus in Generation 7. And y'all, these 4 Pokemon are fantastic representatives for the Fairy type. All of them are so well designed, so well conceptualized, and I think all of them are great. Tapu Koko especially just being a personal favorite of mine among all legendaries. I also am a massive fan of our current only Fairy type starter Pokemon being Primarina, and Primarina is amazing. If Primarina has one fan, it is me. If Primarina has no fans, then I am gone, because I love Primarina. I will always defend Primarina, and a water Fairy type, I mean, come on y'all, that typing is just incredible. Not to mention I also just love mermaids. I did watch H2O growing up.
No. Oh no. 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 Oh no.
Yet another amazing Fairy-type Pokemon introduced in Generation 7 that I needed to talk about is Mimikyu. I mean, it's no secret that this Pokemon is iconic at this point. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody likes Mimikyu. How could you not like Mimikyu? This Pokemon is so well thought out and so well designed, and I love this Pokemon every single time I see it. Also, dare I say, I like it more than Pikachu. Generation 8, I would say, is a fantastic generation to talk about Fairy types in, because there was a lot of changes and different choices that they made here with Fairy type, both in the new Pokemon and its trainer representatives. One of the Pokemon that I just really want to give a spotlight to, and I'm very happy exists, is Grimmsnarl. I just think that this design is so incredible, and for a Fairy type Pokemon to be so dark and menacing and scary and a trickster is really, really fun, because a lot of fairies are tricksters and kind of dark in the actual lore. But let's talk about the location where you can find Grimmsnarl. I don't think we have ever received such a beautiful location in any Pokemon game. Truthfully, I am obsessed with Ballonlea just in itself. Like, if we were going to talk about somewhere I would want to live, I'd want to be, I'd want to visit, just in general, I want to live in Ballonlea. Like, the glowing mushrooms, the cozy vibes, it is just amazing here. And talking about Ballonlea's kooky old lady gym leader in Opal, I just think that there is so much to like about Opal. This is just this crazy old woman who loves seeing the pink in others, and I don't even know what that means or what she's looking at, but girl, she is all about it.
You're really lacking in the color pink.
Excuse us.
Good afternoon.
Opal also has this really fun gimmick during her gym battle in which she asks you questions because she likes to quiz the people that battle her, and I think it's really, really silly.
I will answer only if you correctly respond to my quiz.
Also, it is definitely worth mentioning that out of all the Gigantamax Pokemon forms in this game, I think that Gigantamax Alcremie is definitely one of my favorites. I love that they just added a whole cake on the bottom of Alcremie. I mean, come on, how can you not? It is as delicious as it is destructive. But let's move on to talking about Opal's successor as a Fairy-type gym leader, Bede. Bede is one of your Pokemon rivals in Pokemon Sword and Shield, and he is just this cocky and nasty and rude and so full of himself Pokemon trainer. He actually starts off as a psychic Pokemon specialist, but becomes a Fairy type specialist due to the events of his character's story arc. Bede was taken in and later endorsed by Chairman Rose into the Pokemon Gym League Challenge. He later has his endorsement revoked after he is caught destroying a historical landmark. With not knowing what to do and nowhere really to turn, he gets discovered by Opal, and he's actually someone who has a lot of the pink that she seems to be looking for. Still don't know what it is, by the way. This then meaning that Opal, who's planning to retire from being a gym leader, plans to make Bede her successor to her Fairy-type gym. This not only gives Bede a new lease on life, but also a new opportunity to move forward. He still very much keeps his snarky attitude, and I love that they kept this attribute about him, because having a Fairy-type specialist that is jealous and cocky and rude, I think is really interesting. Bede's character journey and resolve that he comes to at the end of his storyline is one that I really, really enjoy, and I think it's one of the best rival arcs that we have ever gotten in a Pokemon game. And our final battle against him in the Pokemon League proves that. It really feels like Bede has just kind of come into his own and finally is where he's supposed to be, and I think that this battle is really great and utilizes one of my other favorite Gigantamax forms, Gigantamax Hattery, and I love that Bede's ace Pokemon and a lot of his other Pokemon are both Psychic and Fairy type to represent his journey that he goes on and how he is a bit of both. Moving on to Pokemon Legends Arceus, we don't really have a lot of Fairy type representation to talk about here other than one specific Pokemon that I actually really enjoy, which is Enamorus. Yeah, I know that this Pokemon's not for everybody, and some people think that this thing is ugly as hell, but I actually quite enjoy Enamorus. I think it's probably my second favorite out of the genies, with Landorus being my first, plus I just think the genie battles in this game were a fun challenge. Now let's go ahead and take a drive right on over to the Paldea region and talk about the Fairy type representation in Generation 9. Generation 9 introduced me to one of my now personal favorites of all time Fairy type Pokemon, Tinkaton. I mean, it's so adorable, so well designed, and such a strong little cutie. I also have to shine a spotlight on the Paradox Pokemon, but specifically the Fairy type Paradox Pokemon, because not only are Paradoxes just cool in general, but specifically the Fairy type ones I really enjoy. I enjoy Fluttermane and Screamtail, and Iron Valiant is one of the coolest Pokemon we have ever received, point blank period. And you also have a Fairy type Car, which happens to belong to our very first Generation 9 Fairy representative, which is Ortega, a leader of Team Star's Fairy crew. When you first meet Ortega, you just get this like bratty, spoiled little rich kid vibe from him. He's kind of annoying and thinks that you're annoying as well, and he thinks that Fairy types are not just cute, but they can also be pretty nasty, which I feel like for Ortega's character is very fitting for him, and also fits with our new theme we've been getting with Generation 8 and 9 of having Fairy type specialists be a little more snarky and full of attitude. We later come to find out a sad backstory for Ortega though, that just like Team Star's other members, he is also getting bullied and has been a victim of bullying. He created the Starmobiles and has been working so hard for everyone to try to get them to work and operate, and is really disappointed in himself for not only losing the battle against you, but feeling like he can't contribute to his team as much as he would like. I also wanted to go ahead and add in this later scene that I believe was added in the DLC for Ortega and a lot of the other Team Star kids, where you get to help tutor him, and he just is so sassy to you the entire time. He doesn't want your help, he doesn't need your help, and we get to see another interesting character moment for him here of that he may struggle asking for help from others. I really do enjoy the Team Star captains, but I think that Ortega holds a special place in my heart. I also think this photo you get after beating him in battle is super adorable. But we didn't just get one Fairy type specialist in Generation 9, we got two with Lacey. In the Indigo Disc DLC, we meet Lacey over at the Blueberry Academy in the Unova region, and she is a very studious and cute Fairy type specialist who is a student here and member of the BB League in their Elite Four that they happen to have. A fun fact about Lacey is that ever since the Fairy type's introduction, we had never had an Elite Four member be a Fairy type specialist until Lacey. I really did enjoy her character a lot, and I think out of all the characters that you met in the Indigo Disc DLC, she was absolutely one of my favorites. We also found out another fun fact about her is that her father is actually Clay, the ground type gym leader from the Unova region, and I would love if we ever got a black and white remake, I would love to see Lacey make a return, especially because it would then give Unova some Fairy type representation as well. But we're not just gonna stop talking about Fairy types at Generation 9, we gotta talk about the future of Fairy type Pokemon and what I can expect from the next Pokemon games in the series. With Pokemon Legends ZA as the next entry in the mainline series, and with Mega Evolution returning, I have a lot of personal high hopes for Mega Evolutions that I hope to see, and a lot of those are actually Fairy type Pokemon. I personally would love to see Mega Evolutions for Togekiss as a personal favorite of mine, Granbull just to see it get some more love because I feel like it doesn't really get that much, and Florges because I feel like it would have a very nice Fairy Grass type Mega Evolution. And it doesn't even stop there because we have two future type combinations for Pokemon that have not ever been used that include the Fairy type, with that being Fairy Fire and Fairy Ground, both of which I think would be very scary Pokemon types to face in battle. In a previous short that I made here on this channel, I talked about how I feel like Blood Moon Ursaluna could have been our first Fairy Ground Pokemon, what with its relation to the Blood Moon being the Fairy type, and its caked on mud as its armor on its body as the ground typing. But I would also be totally down to see a cute pink Fairy Ground Mole Pokemon. For the Fairy Fire type, I am a firm believer and stand on the fact that I think if the Fairy type had existed back then when Victini was introduced, I think for sure it would have been a Fairy Fire type. I understand understand why they went Fairy Psychic, because at the time Psychic was kind of associated with things that we kind of associate Fairy with now, such as Celebi. It also was very cool at the time that Victini was our first Psychic and Fire Pokemon. And I do personally feel that out of all the unused type combos that we have, Fire Fairy has a lot of potential design-wise. The future for the Fairy type is brighter than ever, and with every single generation that has come out in the mainline series, we have just gotten more amazing designs for Fairy type Pokemon and amazing storylines and characters in our Fairy type specialists. Yes, of course, you can just call me a crazy Fairy type obsessed super fan, and you can call me that any day of the week, but I look forward to every single generation seeing what our new Fairy type specialist and what new Fairy type are going to be introduced in those games, to where it's something that I eagerly await every time a new game is announced. Definitely go ahead and let me know down in the comment section below if you feel as strongly for any Pokemon type as I feel about the Fairy type, and also let me know what your favorite Fairy type is, just for fun, because I love hearing all about it, and y'all know I love hearing what y'all's favorite Pokemon is. As always, thank y'all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Now, if you don't mind me, I have to go back and put all my plushies back on my shelf. I organized them very thoroughly. Now I guess just one question remains. Did Dominic really make an entire video just so we could rant about Fairy type Pokemon?
Oh yeah, I did.